Hi, everyone. It's live, so whenever you're ready to go, just let me know. Boardroom, I just want to bring to your attention that you're still off. If you want to join the meeting, you'll need to go and turn on your video and turn on the microphone.
Your mic? Okay, I was on the wrong mic apparently. Sorry, folks. Welcome to tonight's meeting, 7:40. Today is Wednesday, October 12th. And welcome to our meeting. We're going to start with the flag.
Mayor, we can't hear you.
What? I feel like. Hold on. Welcome to the meeting.
Much better, thank you.
Okay, wow. Okay, everyone, welcome to the meeting. It is October 12th, 7:40. We're about 10 minutes late. We were at a previous meeting to this. So apologies for the lateness. And we'll start with the pledge and move into our meeting. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All righty. I'm told that it's hard to hear me, so hopefully this is better. All right, folks, we have an interesting evening. We're going to change the agenda just a little bit. I believe that we're going to start with cannabis, just letting the folks who may be joining us by Zoom, just so they can they get a sense of just the change in the agenda. Let's start, please, with any trustee announcements. To my right, Trustee White. Nothing? You have something?
No.
Gentlemen?
None.
Okay, as usual, I'm going to say Halloween's around the corner after 2 years of COVID. I'm expecting this to be a super exciting, fun, safe, and watch the kids running across the street, kind of wonderful time for the families for Halloween. And you know, we have lots and lots of activities. They're in the web blast, they're on the website, they're on Facebook with the village, which I hope everyone is following. Jaimie Hoffman does a wonderful job of updating all of our social media, and of course in the mayor's message that went out a little bit late last night, but went out and usually goes out on Tuesdays. So encourage everyone to have a wonderful time there. And we're going to get started.
Good evening, everyone. So as the mayor said, we're having a little bit of change in lineup here. So our first agenda item will be cannabis zoning, a discussion on cannabis zoning. And we also had a last minute change. It was in the posted agenda, but it changed and then was reposted. Chief Sylvester will be presenting his third quarter report on police reform at the end of the meeting. due to another conflict that he's having right now. So with that, I would like to just briefly state that this discussion on cannabis zoning, this is a follow-up to several conversations we've had based on New York's legalization of recreational marijuana and the board's decision to allow for dispensaries within the village of Ossining. The state has already started giving out licenses for dispensaries. That means that we could be approached by somebody wishing to open one anytime now. And it is important that the board consider, right now, that business can go anywhere that a retail business is allowed. If the board deems that they want to have some restrictions similar to the restrictions that the state liquor authority has for the sale of alcohol, that's something that really has to be decided before we are approached by somebody who wishes to open a dispensary. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to our Director of Planning, Jaime Martinez, and our Corporation Counsel, Stuart Kahan.
Go right ahead. Hi. So first, thanks for letting me come here today. I'm going to be really quick. I know that we've been through this before and kind of discussed the impact of different levels of buffers. The heart of it is really that currently under the code, this is a retail use. The retail, anywhere that retail is allowed, including properties that would have an existing use in a neighborhood that has an old store that precedes the zoning code, they could theoretically go into that area. And so I think that there's a couple of things that you really should do to best regulate this. You need to create a discrete use for cannabis so that you can assign it to the districts that you think it makes most sense. There are, certainly conditions that you are going to want to consider, whether you're comfortable with the distance from schools and religious uses that are required now by the state, which obviously you will not have to defend. In the future, you may have to defend, extending them to 1,000 feet. You'll never have to defend deciding whether you're going to put it in specific zoning districts that it makes sense. That's the easiest way, I think, to deal with it. A lot of times there's been this discussion about saying it's like liquor stores or alcohol stores. The zoning code currently doesn't accommodate liquor stores either. It just considers it a retail use. So liquor store can theoretically go anywhere that the state liquor license licensed them to be within a retail establishment. So that's kind of the case for why you should create a specific retail cannabis use and set it within the districts that make most sense. I think there's been some agreement that Arcadian is kind of a good location. It doesn't meet any of these 1,000 feet thresholds. There might be some other areas where it makes sense as well, but I kind of defer to the board trustees to sort of pick the areas that they think make most sense, and we can line up the zoning districts with those decisions.
Folks,
I'm sorry.
let me just add a little bit. Thank you, Jaime. It would be important to include in the zoning code a specific definition for cannabis dispensaries, so that it is a specific use that is dealt with in the code. Currently, there is no such definition. Most municipalities in the state who have amended their zoning code to deal with cannabis have included a definition for cannabis dispensaries, pretty much matching what the state's definition is under the Cannabis Control Act, or the Marijuana Reform and Taxation Act. So that would be one aspect to look at. What other municipalities have also done is that they have made cannabis dispensaries a conditional use, so that it would require an approval. That could be an approval by the planning board. In some cases, it has been, some municipalities have left that approval process to the Board of Trustees itself as to where that should be located. One of the restrictions that Jaime was talking about relating to state liquor authority is distance. And you may recall, we had a cabaret license discussion regarding La Chusa, which is across the street from the high school. And there was a question, the distance. And under the state liquor authority rules, the distance is measured to the front entrance of the other building, be it a school, religious. facility or anything like that. I came across at least one municipality who, in determining the distance, it's just basically a straight line from the front of the dispensary to the building. So that could be the back of the building, but if it's within X number of feet, it would not be permitted. So they have an actually broader definition of distance in terms of how it's done under the state liquor authority. Other restrictions, for example, you can't have more than 2 on the same block, 2 dispensaries, for example. And that's what was recently done. Town of Henrietta, which is outside of Rochester, Town of Lloyd, which is in Ulster County. I get to learn what all these towns and municipalities are that I had never heard of before. And some other ones there. The village of Clyde, yes, Trustee Fritchie, you're aware of it. So some of these places do have these kind of restrictions. I should point out that there aren't as many specific zoning regulations yet. One of the reasons is that, as with our code, it would be considered a retail use. And we define retail use. We have if you look at our zoning code, we have a very broad definition of retail use. It can go anywhere from drugstores to essentially, we list a couple, but essentially anything that sort of would fit within that box would be considered a retail use. A dispensary would be considered a retail use. But there will also be requirements here with regard to signage, some of which we're waiting for from the state, but there will be certain requirements that the village itself could impose. The important thing, as we've said before, is the village can put in certain restrictions as to time, place, and manner. But you can't say, for example, that the only place you could do it is in a particular district and no other districts at all. You probably will find yourself having an issue with the cannabis control folks if you try to do that. So I think the important thing would be a definition, fitting it in with a particular use group. And if you then decide that within particular zoning districts, it should or should not be allowed, you can do that. You may want to put it, because currently we would allow it in, let's just see, our plan center, neighborhood center 1, neighborhood center 2, village center, general business, Station Plaza North, Station Plaza South, Riverfront Development District, institutional redevelopment, which actually is Sing Sing, and the planned waterfront districts. One of the restrictions they have is that you can't do it within, some places have within 500 feet of a prison. That might be something actually you'd want to consider here, but the fact is that everything surrounding it, Sing Sing is essentially a residential district anyway, so you would not be putting it in any residential districts. But you'd want that specifically, written into the code. As Jaime has pointed out, as Karen mentioned, the state is already accepting license applications for individuals who have been affected by past cannabis convictions under the penal law. We do get occasionally requests for asking, is the village, accepting applications yet? And I suspect that we will begin seeing more of those, particularly when the state begins to promulgate the rules for the dispensaries and in terms of the licenses to be issued. Those are expected to be issued in proposed form by the end of the year, probably with an effective date sometime early in 2023. So that will be happening soon. It should be noted that a number of our surrounding communities have completely opted out of both dispensaries and lounges. Briarcliff Manor, for example, is one. Briarcliff, though, passed a very extensive local law with regard to cultivation of cannabis at home, which is something else the state allows, but currently they don't allow it yet because they haven't dealt with all the nuances. I did discuss with the board last week the rules with regard to medical cannabis to be grown at home, but that's a separate and distinct category. So again, the view from planning and the view from Corp Counsel would be to start at this point to look at revisions to the zoning code. Now, again, this board could decide to do nothing, and if that's the case, then it's it's a retail use. And it would be available in all of those different districts, subject to the restrictions that already exist under state law. Otherwise, the board could impose certain restrictions. You could put in certain times of operation, for example. You could put in distance, as Jaime was mentioning, and you could put in other certain types of restrictions, measurements of distances and things like that. We think it's a good idea to have that on the books, particularly if this board wants it to be a conditional use, not a permitted use, because currently, as Jaime pointed out, it would be a permitted use in all of those districts. If you wanted it conditional, currently conditional use permits are provided by the planning board under our code. And they have a process under the code as specifically what they have to consider in granting a conditional use permit. Understand, the idea of a conditional use permit is that you're able to do what you want to do, but they can impose certain conditions on you to do it. Not that they can say that you can't do it, but they can impose conditions on you. Some of those conditions could be distance. They could be hours of operation, lighting, parking issues could come up. So that could be something that you may want to do. That would require a specific reference both in the code and in our use tables, where the use table would specifically have to indicate for cannabis dispensaries, it's a conditional use, which I think one of the more recent ones that I sent around, I think it might have been Clyde of all places, has it specifically there where they're all conditional uses, which means that in that case, their planning board approves the use of the particular dispensaries. So that's again something for this board to consider. No action would be that it could be in any of those zones, as Jaime pointed out. The board takes certain action. It can impose certain restrictions without completely, obviously, cutting off the businesses. So this is more to just bring it back to the board's attention, because it is something that is certainly going to be here. I would not be surprised you'll start having folks who will be either certified patients or designated caregivers who will be growing on site, either in their home or adjacent to their home for medical. And once the state promulgates the rules for recreational cultivation, I'm sure you'll see that as well. So all of that has to come into play. And with regard to those two, specifically the medical, which is now in regulation, the board may want to consider some restrictions, not in terms of where you can grow, because the state has said where you can grow, but for example, what kind of buffer there should be, what kind of plantings there might be around the area, so that it's not sort of like open and obvious that that's what you're growing. The state is sort of vague in terms of what they want you to do, but you can put certain restrictions in terms of that. Particularly if they're growing inside, you may have to check in terms of lighting that's required, ventilation that's required, things like that, which otherwise you would not have to think about. So that's another aspect of this, but we just wanted to bring it back to everyone's attention, because I would think that within 6 months from now, we're probably looking at those regulations being on the books and applications being filed.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So here's what I'd like to do. We've had lots of conversation about this. I think I'd like to suggest a roadmap and then have people edit it rather than have an hour-long conversation. Let me start by saying this: the medicinal marijuana piece, there are 2 ways to build sidewalks. You let people walk on it for a year on the grass. When you see where everybody walks, that's where you put the concrete, because you know that makes the most sense where a sidewalk goes. That to me is the dealing with this piece, which is the medical. I believe that rather wait and see what happens before determining what kind of lamp should be inside a rental unit. I mean, I don't even have any expertise to work with, and it'll be going around circles. So I'd like to leave that alone for now till we start seeing people come to us with problems and issues, gather those issues and problems and say, okay, we now have this. Otherwise, we're all having a theoretical conversation, what might or might never happen, and no expertise to work with. So I'd like to leave that alone. The corollary to that is the piece I'm looking at here, which is zoning. So I understand the importance, and Trustee White had a conversation over the weekend about this, but I understand the urgency in that you believe that within 6 months, as was just said, we're going to get requests, and we have to be able to answer people's requests. Like, I don't know, I'll get back to you, is not great answers. So I wrote down, like, based on many conversations, like 5 things that I'd like us to edit and say yay or nay to, that we can have Stuart and Jaime work on and put together something for us, based on everything we just heard. I don't want to repeat the whole thing. So number 1, I wrote down the cannabis dispensary should match the state definition. I don't want to look at 15 different municipalities. As I just heard, if I heard it correctly, the state has some sort of definition. Let's stay consistent. I assume that as the year progresses, the state will come down with more regulations and more whatever. And so I think it's important. I'm just going to read through and then everybody can edit. Number 2, I wrote that the cannabis dispensaries, the question was planning board or board of trustees. The planning board is already very busy. And I think that when you have something that is controversial, which this was, that the state passed, I think at least for 1 or 2 years, and I don't know if we could put a limit, it should come to the board. Because I think that the elected officials should learn what the real issues are and not through memos. And after the fact and all that, we pass something, we should be involved in the first iterations of solutions for it and not have the planning board deal. I think my recommendation would be a year or 2 into it, that the planning board should take over. That's my opinion. Again, everybody can edit. I'm just going to read through my notes. Number 3, distance. It seemed to me a fair thing to say not to the property line of a school or a church, which some municipalities do. I don't know, front entrance, back entrance. I wrote a note, distance should be to the nearest point of the building. I know it's going to get complicated. They have a parking lot, they have a shed. The front entrances maybe should be it, but I feel like it's the building. I mean, there might be a lot of grass and land around a building, so going to the property line may not be fair. But I think when you go to the building, again, we'll edit this momentarily. I would recommend that we do no more than 1 dispensary in any zone, not like a half a mile, 1,000 feet or whatever, but rather just say, you know, we have X number of zones, and that way we're not restricting anybody to 1 zone, you know, but we also wouldn't have more than like 1 in a zone. I don't know what the math looks like. Times of operations, I leave that to everybody else, but I mean, these are dispensaries, they're not lounges. I'm not seeing why they would be open past like 9 or 10 o'clock at night and, you know, not before a certain time. I'm open to discussion, all of these, but we probably should decide. So these things are not open till 3 in the morning, which it sounds like they can be unless we say otherwise. Anyway, those are the things I wrote down, open for discussion.
I'll respond. Thank you, Mayor. For number 1, the state definition, I'm in agreement. For number 2, the decision for conditional use being by the Board of Trustees, I'm in disagreement. Not that I think that it should be the planning board, but my suggestion, or what I would put on the table as the option, is the first option that Stuart gave, which is basically do nothing and have it be as of right, as opposed to conditional. The reason being that the conditions, unless the conditions are things like hours, and we define that, then I would be fine with that, and I would be fine with the board deciding that. But largely, I want to take it out of the hands of specific people deciding whether to advance a specific dispensary or not, because my own feeling is it becomes more of a referendum of how do you feel about cannabis than how do you feel about this particular dispensary. That's conjecture though. We haven't seen it in reality. So who's to say, but that's how I feel about that. With distance, the argument that I've made in the past is what's going to be reasonable so that it's not close to a school or a house of worship, but also not the maximum amount Jaime has shown us visuals of 1,000 feet, 1,500 feet, whatever it is, that makes it functionally unable for any dispensary to be anywhere. That's not my intention. I just want it to be not near the places that I named. So 500 feet or whatever, even the minimum amount does have enough of a buffer because we have so many of those institutions. That's what I would advocate for. I think I'm generally fine with no more than one dispensary per zone, but the reality is that if we're limiting it to particular zones, I don't know how many of these operations we're going to have, but they're not inexpensive operations to start up and maintain and all that. And if in Arcadian there are 3 dispensaries, to me, it's like, what's the difference? If there's 1, if there's 3, it's like, what's the difference? If those 3 were spread out across the village, how is that better than if they were concentrated in Arcadian? That's my sense is that doesn't necessarily track to a better experience for the village. As long as it's in a place that makes sense, I think that we can manage it if it turns out that there are too many requests for a particular place. And for times of operation, I looked at some dispensaries just while we were sitting here, and they generally close at 9 or 10. That to me is reasonable, and we want to name that specifically. I'd be fine with that, but I think generally the business model is such that 9 or 10 is when it closes, and that's what I would be in favor of. Thank you.
I wanted to say that I went to a seminar on this very topic at a NICOM conference a few months earlier this year. When did we go?
Went 2 months ago.
No, not that
No,
one.
no, the one before that.
And there have already been lawsuits from cannabis producers who were zoned out of certain areas because the municipality didn't want them in that area, and the municipality lost. And as I recall, I should have brought the exact language. The guy who gave this dispensary talk knows more about this than probably anybody in the state. What's his name? Wade.
Oh, he's great.
He's great. I mean, and he said very specifically that the state is gonna frown upon attempts to limit or zone so hard that it's really hard to open one. I'm not sure. I'm not convinced we can create bigger buffers than that they recommend. I'm not sure we can. We're really not.
I don't think, but nobody's recommending bigger buffers.
No, right here. But we have,
Yeah, but that's not what we're saying.
okay.
Omar said the minimum is 500, right?
It's 500, yeah.
Okay, well, we're sitting here talking about all these buffers from all these.
No,
areas.
that's what they gave us. We're not, that's not in my list. I don't agree with those. Yeah.
200 from religious, 500 from
Those are the
education.
minimums, yeah. This is stuff they gave us.
So I mean, I think that the irony is if you said, okay, you can't have any dispensaries, well, first you have to have an open storefront, okay? And then if you said, okay, we don't want dispensaries downtown, well, you're actually limiting business and foot traffic coming downtown, I mean, you want to bring people downtown and you're saying, well, but not this type of business. So, I just, I hesitate to be too restrictive.
Dave, I just want to point out that if you look at the minimum state requirements and you look at downtown, there really is,
I know, we have city churches, I think.
yeah, there's like a sliver of where it would even be.
Yeah, that's not,
conceivably
that's what I'm
possible.
saying, we naturally,
Right.
there's a
don't-
natural inhibition process here in the village, so I personally am not for making it greater, but as to who decide, I don't know, if the trustees don't decide and the planning board doesn't decide, then it's just, and you make it just a regular business.
It's as of right is what was,
As
it's
of
either
right,
as of
yeah.
right or conditional. Omar is saying we should just do it as of right. And
Well, what other
nobody looks at it.
businesses do the trustees ever do that with? Is there a precedent for that where they say, okay, we approve or disapprove of this business?
I don't think so.
There
We
is no,
can.
there is no business which requires a conditional use permit by which the Board of Trustees grants the permit. All conditional use permits are granted only by the planning board.
So that would be a new precedent.
There are some special permits, very few, but there are some special permits related, I think, to infrastructure type projects.
Yeah, we had one with the gas station by Camp Woods where they needed to cut through, you know.
Yeah,
had to
like
cut.
if they need a.
So
piece
they
of
came
road
to
project.
us. So it happened, like, it shouldn't happen a lot. That's the whole point. It should never happen a lot. So, and what else, what are the other
I'm
pieces?
sorry, I didn't memorize the list that you.
No, that's okay. Where are we? We said, like I said, I'll repeat, cannabis dispensaries match the state definition. That was my suggestion. Cannabis dispensary, whether it should go planning or board of trustees. I said board of trustees, the assumption is it should be conditional. Trustee Lopez said, I don't agree. It should be as of right. It doesn't need to go to anybody in that case. Distance, I said to the front entrance. I think Trustee Lopez said, oh, you were fine with that. I wrote your name down. I couldn't read what I wrote. I said can't have more than one per zone, and Trustee Lopez said it's not even necessary to do that. If they want to have 3 in one zone, what's the big deal? There aren't that many zones available to them. Right? Yeah. So you could just say, yeah, I agree with everything Trustee Lopez said. I mean,
Times of operation as well.
oh, times of operation is up here, which is why I missed it.
9 to 9.
So he said, he looked it up and it's mostly 9 or 10 o'clock, but I think to our attorney's point, please document it so that it's done. Like if we say 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, then there's no discussion. If that's what most people do, it should be reasonable that we state that.
But in terms of distance from parks, that's not mandated by the state, right? Park is only schools and churches, right?
No, I mean, so the retail use is not mandated by parks, but you can, anywhere you can smoke a cigarette, you can smoke marijuana. And so I think the bigger concern is not about being close to parks and selling weed. It should probably be the use of marijuana in a park and whether or not that's a concern for people.
Different, but that's a different discussion than what we're doing right now.
Well, right now, we have no smoking of anything in our parks, no vaping, so it's a.
So we're done. I
24
thought we were
hour
done.
laws.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, wait a second. Are you done, Dana?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll go back to your list, ma'am. So yes, for number 1.
Okay.
Number 2 was conditional use being approved by the village board. You said a temporary for about more or less 2 years.
Yeah, I'm
So
flexible on
Yeah,
this stuff.
and I'll be in favor of that. The reason why I'm saying that is because we actually, when we did the comprehensive plan, the update for the comprehensive plan itself, we actually had to ask to the board any changes. We have a special permit that we approved, and one of the regulations that we had passed on the overlay portion of it, instead of going to the planning board, actually got up in front of us as well. So there is some sort of a precedent, not maybe on the conditional use, but we have done that before. So I'll be in favor of doing that as well, because as we are growing and learning, and again, and I will ask Stuart to double check that if it would be done as a for a temporary period of time of 2 years, and after that kind of goes back to a regular as a right, as Omar mentioned. So I've been looking into something like that. More regulations and conditions. I think that the number 3 is the distance, and
Yeah.
I'll be okay with it to a building.
What did you say about
You said
distance?
building. I think you said buildings, right?
Did you have a thing for the distance at all?
The minimum.
The minimum?
Oh,
Okay.
so it was a little bit different than what I think what Rico was saying.
Can I ask one quick question
So
here?
that's page.
So there's these buffers are based off the parcel line and not the building line. So the building line.
So it's even-
restricted
it's restricted.
significantly. With the high school in particular, there's a lot of yardage.
Correct.
So consider whether you're concerned about the parcel and what can be, fields, right? There's tracks around the school. Do you want to be close to that, or are you just talking about the building footprint?
But that's sort of, it goes back to a little bit of what Stuart said. Sure, when we're talking about liquor licenses, we do measure from door to door. So, and that's why I wanted to kind of clarify, because if we're looking at the map one of the maps that you providing, the one that
Has the minimum.
has the minimum that Omar mentioned is the 500 square feet radius. So what does that look like? Are we measuring to the parcel, like you said? So these are parcels.
These are parcel lines.
Okay.
Yeah, so you are measuring.
And yeah, these are measured to the parcel.
Okay, so that's what we have to make sure that.
So the building actually makes it less space.
No, more space.
No, the building makes it
No.
less space.
The
Let's
front
do-
door
let's
makes
phase
it
two.
more.
Yes.
Front door makes it
So
more,
the-
which
the
is what liquor
distance
stores
from
are.
The building, it's gonna be much shorter, right? Because you have 100 feet of lawn. So imagine cutting, what looks like 500 feet now is actually gonna be 400 feet, so 100 feet closer.
So
Okay.
that's, so
So you want to go with this one,
I,
number one?
I think this makes it a little more stricter.
Okay,
than
number
anything
one.
else.
We've got three number ones. Go ahead.
So,
I don't mean to be rushing through it. I just know we've had so much conversation about this.
so the parcel portion is based on this.
Yeah.
To the last.
I'm okay with
What I
that.
can do
No, I
is,
don't think it should be parcel.
I don't either.
That is
so
too
what-
restrictive.
I can certainly show you the difference. We do have building.
I just want
Too
to make
restrictive.
one point, because I think it's important for the board to remember that it was only a few years ago that a smoke shop opened up right across from the high school on Route 9. And it was, our state legislators were out there. So I think that you're not necessarily, there aren't that many places, like you do have to consider that. Because what people consider close to the high school is going to be on Route 9. There is no other retail space.
Like the rest is residential.
Again, I just want to put out there that was met with serious opposition that ended up with legislation getting rid of that building. So I
Okay.
just want
So-
everybody to put that. Okay.
Those gotta be 21. Okay, so terms of operation, I'm gonna jump on that one, so I'm okay with whatever.
We're all in
regulation.
agreement, okay?
So I think. the
What about
only
the
one-
zones?
No, that's what I'm gonna go.
Oh,
That's what
okay.
I'm going, that's my next one, and I think the reason I'm putting it last, because it's a little more complex. So
Okay,
if we go on with this, and I think it will be helpful for us to understand this, Jaime, if we go with the 500 radius, however we want to do it. So I'm looking at the zoning map, sure. One of the things that you mentioned here, and I'm sorry, Jaimie, you're probably gonna yell at me, I wasn't talking to the mic. You mentioned Arcadian, so that's a PC zone, sure. There's no other PC zone in our village. But what it is you have a GB zone, which is next door.
Yes.
So, and they, based on this map, I think it will be helpful for us to see an overlay of the zoning map, at least for me, a zoning map in this map that you have created. And that will give us a better idea of what the zones look like and what areas, because based on this map, you also have something in a PRD section of our zoning map, I think. I'm looking at right. Partial, part, is it PRD or no, yeah, you have portions of that and also fall under the,
The CDD is in there because the CDD does allow retail as a conditional use.
I'm looking at the one on Hudson Street. That, I'm pretty sure is the PRD portion of it. That kind of goes back into the S50. And then it kind of wraps around the old precinct portion into Hunter Street, and it kind of goes back into the waterfront portion of that. So you have the PRD, you have the IR, you have the RDD zone in there as well. So the PWB, all that stuff. So I think it will be helpful for us to see the overlay map with those zones. And then we kind of, because you also have parts of this, you have parts of Prone Avenue, Upper Prone Avenue, that I think is important for us to understand what does that look like, because we do have a lot of retail and residential. It's a whole mix zone. So at least for me, it will be helpful to do that. So and then I'll be able to answer that question.
okay. Bob?
Definition, I agree. I think it should be conditional use. I absolutely think it should come to us. We lit the torch here, being one of the first to jump on board here. So I think there's a lot to learn from it. And I think that we should be at least championing this for the first couple of years.
So you're good with, I said 1 or 2 years.
Whatever.
We're flexible, but you have, but it's a temporary.
Yeah.
Is the idea.
So the distance, the minimums are fine. But that's to the building, not to the lots. Number of dispensaries. Arcadian, a number and location times, I agree with the times, but I could get into a whole discussion of locations. You got Arcadian, you got the north end of the village, you got Roosevelt Square, you got Washington Square, that you're within the 500 feet. So if they want to put 3 of them and they want to fight it out in Arcadian, God bless them.
Okay, so I'm gonna summarize.
Sorry, may I, something else that I forgot, something that I think we should look into it, something that Omar and Stuart, we have talked about. Other municipalities also have passed this legislation a couple of years back. One of them was in Scarsdale, is the no smoking anywhere in the downtown. I'm not sure if we want to talk about this, that's something that.
Wait, no smoking, and so like on the sidewalk.
Sidewalk on the downtown areas as well. That's what Scarsdale did last year. I think a few other municipalities have done this, something similar along those lines. So if we're looking into not restrict that, but at least allocate some non-smoking areas on our area over the downtown, at least that's what we did to all the parks right now, or any public buildings. So I'm not sure if that's something that the board may consider, but I'm going to throw that one on there.
I'm gonna open that up to the floor, but I want to finish one. And I know there's a relationship, but actually not, because as was said, whatever we have now that says no smoking in our parks, no smoking or vaping will apply also to cannabis. So to me, that's one topic. The entire smoking concept, cigarettes and otherwise, is another topic. I just want to close out this topic and give direction to Stuart and also to Jaime of next steps so we can move this box along. This is what I'm hearing back. There's a majority, not a unanimous, to have the board. I'll do, I think, 1 year, like, because it's not a unanimous, let's go with the shorter.
Can I just
Oh,
clarify?
yeah, please.
Stuart, can you clarify what is, if a dispensary comes in front of us under the conditional use banner and it's to us to approve or not, what are we approving or not?
You would be approving a conditional use permit for that location to operate a cannabis dispensary. The applicant would come before you to open up a cannabis dispensary at that location.
So it would be a cannabis
Go ahead.
dispensary.
Yeah,
Oh, please.
so I want to kind of jump in there. So the way the code is written, conditional uses are determined by the planning board, special permits are determined by the village board. And I think that your intent here is to own the decision, but not necessarily own conditional uses. So the mechanics of changing the code to allow you to control conditional use are more complicated than just granting you through a special permit with a sunset clause over a year and adding some of the factors that you need to consider during that time period, which would include anything the conditional users are doing, right? I think that just, I want to make sure that we're clear. You're still going to have governance over it for a year or 2 years or whatever you decide. But I don't know that it makes a lot of sense to rewrite the code to allow you to do conditional uses when you can probably cover most of that under special permit.
Got it. And so it's not, these are businesses, these are dispensaries that are within the allowable spaces they can be in. They're not in a restricted space. They're far enough from all the spaces. Okay. And what we are deciding is, like, are we cool with it? Generally, that's the idea.
So
Go ahead.
yeah, I mean, so with special permits and all of these, generally you've written into the code the general structure that you want these projects to work under. It becomes very difficult for you to say no to them as long as they can make sure they meet all of those criteria. You can add conditions, you can have a public hearing, so people can say, I'm really concerned about this being open past 8 residential neighborhood. So you shut them down at 8. You add all sorts of special conditions to determine how they can run their business. And I think there's a lot of value in doing that, whether it ends up being conditional use with the planning board in a few years, or as a special permit for the first year and then later, however you want to do that. Having the ability to have the public come in and provide comments on how it's run is, I think, helpful and useful. And you can write that in there, but I don't want to give you the impression that they can just come in and you're going to be able to say no, and that's going to be supported down the road, right? You're going to essentially have to review these applications, and if they meet the criteria, you're going to be somewhat compelled to vote in favor of them.
So may I sort of sometimes I think about, thank you, Jaime, that was very helpful. So I want to kind of go back a little bit to our cabaret license concept. As long as they meet all the criteria, we obviously will review that with those cases with our police department, the building inspector and everything else, and we got the bladder reports, so that kind of brings me to another question for you, Stuart. If we were to say we have instead of conditional, we do a special permit purpose situation in here, and with the concept of the cabaret license, is that something that we can govern to say, look, you have a year and you have to come back in front of us and we review your application? Is that something that other parts are doing to kind of,
Like a license.
exactly?
You could. The town does that with its cabaret licenses. So they basically, you come back and you'll have to look at it again.
Yeah, but this,
But you don't have to, but if you're granting, now, the code currently provides that a special permit can include conditions. It can actually include a time frame if you felt you had to do that. But it's a very rare circumstance that you would be imposing it, because you've already essentially said the business is doing this. If you're going to turn it in, keep in mind, the reason I don't want to get into the word license is the state is already licensing it. So you're not licensing it. You're giving it a permit to operate at a location. The actual license, that's done by the state. So unlike other businesses that we could license, this is not one. This is the state.
I was just asking a question.
Well-
That answers my question. So thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that. My general feeling about it, and it looks like I don't have the votes, but I want to put it on the record. My general feeling about it is we design the local conditions to reflect our priorities, closed by a certain time, this far away from whatever, that apply across the board. And then it's out of our hands. The reason being that there are people that are just generally against cannabis that are going to come out every time that there's an application to make that argument. We're going to do the same song and dance every time. Like Jaime says, if they are meeting the conditions, we can, I guess, do these kind of conditional, well, come back when, can you demonstrate to us that you opened dispensaries before in similar communities and they've been successful? And I don't know. I don't think that I think that it creates more complication than necessary, and it increases the bias in the creation of a business that for the, like, we're gonna have like 3 of these. And so I don't know, a maximum, that's my sense, but we'll see how, it's a year, so I'll be here.
yeah, that's why I think I'll reduce it to a year. A year is not a lot of time. It gives us an opportunity to meet at least with 1 or 2. It's like totally brand new businesses. Frankly, in retrospect, I wish we did that with more businesses. When, in a new category, so this is a new category retail business. It's not a category that has existed in our community. So I would go with like a year, which is not a long time, and then it just disappears.
I would mention that at the meeting with the murder people that came in, they have, I think it's 160 licenses that are going.
Jaime, can you please speak into the microphone?
Yeah, there are like 160 licenses that are going to that first group of ex-offenders, or sort of family members of ex-offenders, whatever. They're going to support that business, and they're not going to be handing out a ton of new licenses that will put those people at risk. So a year may go by and you'll get none.
Okay.
It's a distinct possibility.
All right. It's all right with me. But if we get 1 or 2, I mean, we all believe that we're not expecting 100 of these. Probably a couple, given how expensive they are. And by the way, not only how expensive, but they actually have to succeed and stay in business, right? Opening a business of any kind is no easy task. So they have to be entrepreneurs. There is limited space. We're expecting, I don't know, 2 to 4 is like what most people are thinking in this community. Okay, so so Stuart, did you get all of the sort of next steps on here? Do I need to repeat them?
Got it, Mayor, thanks.
Okay, I think everybody sort of got almost everything they wanted. And even on the one item, you wanted more on the space, right? On the Like this thing where you want it to, we need to understand the distances, whether it's building, and you're gonna do that. We don't need them against every scenario. Just the most minimum one is the one we need the scenario. We don't need you to go back and do all of these pages, just one.
Okay.
So that we're the right distance from churches and schools.
Do you want, would you like a set that shows from the building footprint and a set that shows from the parcel line?
I think it will be helpful to understand that. I'm with this, but I know the board members want it to the building.
What do you want?
I'm cool with that.
You're cool with this as it is?
Yeah,
You
I'm
want
okay
it-
with it. No, I'm okay with this showing the way it is, but just in the zoning map. But I know two other board members
this
wanted
one.
it to the door.
No, that was a thought. I don't particularly, I'm fine. This one,
Okay.
okay? It's not that I'm changing my mind. I think most of us.
The way
are
you
fine
have it
with
right now.
The parcel line minimums overlaid with the
this.
zoning.
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
fine with that. Yeah, Bob, we're all good with it? I don't think we. That's fine.
Although we want to know the people.
No, that's fine.
Well, I don't agree with the parcel.
You don't agree with the parcel line.
Make your argument. What's the argument?
It's too restrictive.
To the mic, let the people hear you.
The parcels can be gigantic.
Dana. People can't hear
I'm sorry. I thought I was just talking to you guys.
You're like a live on TV.
I forget sometimes, I'm sorry, I'm still nervous. I just think it's too restrictive. You know, if you have a building in the midst of a huge parcel and you're going from the parcel line, you know, let's say, for example, Mariondale, I'm just using this as an example. You know, you've got the Mariondale building, but then you got tons of acreage around it, right? So if you say it's gonna be from the parcel line, which is another you know, I mean, not that I'm seeing like anybody else,
I'm
but
convinced. Could you do both? I mean, that was already done. Could you just do the building line?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
so now we need you. There you go.
Convinced?
We're good, we're like, the thing is, we all have the same idea. We agreed to do this. Shame on the communities that talked a big game and then didn't do this, as far as I'm concerned. And that's their problem. For us, it is not to agree to something and then make it so restrictive that nobody could open a business here. That is not the point of this. We need to be fair to entrepreneurs. We need to be fair to the legislation and the intention that we have. So I think we're all in agreement. Now we're down to like micro points, 500, 1,000, parcel, building, you know, and we do know that Marydale is a good one. Arcadian surrounded, one side it's Route 9 and commercial CVS, but then there's residences on the other side. So, you know, let's come up with the right thing that meets our intentions. And I think we've made our intentions very clear as a board. Okay,
Can I get one last follow-up? I'd love to.
did you see me doing this? That was like my, we're done.
I know.
thing.
The only follow-up is that, you know, we're gonna need to come back, obviously,
Yeah.
with maps and recommendations and everything else. I'd like to get a timeline that you think is realistic to have this done.
No,
The
2 weeks
state,
from now.
2 weeks from now?
yeah, we're ready to go, and I think Stuart wants to get moving on this, so.
We'll make sure that works.
Oh, boy.
We'll make sure that works internally. We have a
No,
lot
no,
going on.
I don't, I think like you guys have to figure out your timeframes of
I think we'll drive
the
that timeline.
budgets and everything and get back to us. And then if you tell me it's a year, that's gonna be a no. But if you say like something reasonable.
We'll figure out the timeline based
Yeah,
on everybody
that's-
involved.
You guys figure it out. Okay. Village manager, this is work session. Next.
It is, so thank you, everybody.
Wait a second. Did we just change that one item or did you say there were 2 items that we were changing?
No, the way it's written here is correct, but earlier, on an earlier version, the police reform was up higher.
Okay, so we're good.
So we're good. So the next topic is an increase in the maximum income level for senior citizen tax exemption. And this is something that,
Hi, Jaime. Good night. Thank you.
you know, we believe it's something that could be helpful for many of our lower income seniors. And I'd like to turn this over to Stuart Kahan, Corporation Counsel.
Is this another Stuart Kahan thing?
Well, I'm gonna do a little bit next, and then we have Kevin too, so we're gonna break it up.
Okay,
but mostly
Stuart.
Thank you, Manager. The governor recently signed a legislation amending the real property tax law, specifically as relates to disabled property owners who are low income and seniors who are low income. Prior to the change in the law, if you had an income of annual income of up to $29,000, you got a 50% exemption on your property tax assessment, on your assessed value of your property. As of July 1, that $29,000 was raised to $50,000. What that also did is there was also a sliding scale. So under the old, if you earned anywhere up to just under 38,000, you could claim up to a 5% exemption. That those numbers have now been changed. So in order to, let me back up. The village currently has in its code the tax exemption for disabled property owners. The village does not have in its code a tax exemption for low-income seniors. The town does, but the village does not. My recommendation, what this board wants to do, is to revise the provision relating to disabled individuals who are property owners, to raise the minimum, to raise it to $50,000, and then the sliding scale as the state has, and to add to our tax code a specific article for disabled seniors to give them a similar tax break. As I said, the town has it, the village, for whatever reason, does not have it on its books. My understanding is that the town is already is calling for a public hearing, I guess, in 2 weeks to adopt the changes that were approved, signed by the governor. From articles I've read, the county is going to do that. The school district is aware of it, but they just have not had a discussion yet. The taxable year, I believe, is May 1. So that would mean we want to have this in place so that we can have it ready for what would be the 2024 roll. But it would provide benefits not only to disabled property owners, but also to seniors. Important in the case of seniors is that if you have a husband and wife and they are claiming the senior exemption, and the older of the two spouses dies, if the other spouse is over 62, they can still claim the exemption, even if they're not 65. You can't take that exemption away. So this would put us in line with the recent change in the state. And just in terms of the numbers, since the base would be raised to 50,000, the schedule would go anywhere from 50,000 to as much as 58,399.99. If you have that income, you'd be able to take a 5% exemption. And that exemption is after everything else with the exception of STAR. So it's a big deal, and it can really lower people's property tax bills.
Okay.
So
I'm sure there's some economics about you, but for me, I'm not even sure that matters so much. We have to go to a public hearing on this
you
one.
have to have a local law, and to avoid having to keep doing this with new local laws, there would be a provision in there that whenever the state changes the
I'm
numbers,
just gonna, okay.
we would change. the
It's like an index. I love
Right,
that
we would
idea.
index it that way. Other places have, we already have that with regard to, I think, ETPA or one of those others. We put that in there so we
Yeah,
can do the same thing.
That's really the way to go and not go through this each other.
Right.
So I don't know about the rest of the board. For me, I don't really, I'm sure we're gonna lose some money and, the town, is a much smaller entity. It probably will affect our revenue, but for me, it's a tough go and seniors have a really rough time. For me, this is a no-brainer, but I don't want to insult anybody. So I'm in support of it. Can I get anybody else?
Me too.
100%. Amen. So moved.
Okay,
We'll
I
call,
think that was-
I'll put it together. We'll call for public hearing
Okay.
and it'll be in a couple.
and thank you for bringing this to our attention, Stuart. I don't think any of us would have even recognized that this was a thing without you bringing it to our attention. And we'll have to also make sure that our Emmy Award winner communications manager will get this information out to seniors. Because the worst thing about it is if we pass something like this and they don't know about it or aren't aware of it, that would be a shame. So we want to make sure people know.
There'll be a whole.
We can do that.
process. It'll be in the code so that they'll be able to get that exemption promptly from us. And as I said, it will raise it up to 50,000, which for many seniors and those who are disabled
Big
will
deal.
make a big difference. Thank you.
Terrific. I know, you're in shock. We went through that in 3 minutes. You're like reading notes.
I am. So our next item on the agenda is our fire protection IMA with the town of Ossining. And this goes way, way back to long before most of any of us here were born even. But the contract is, everything works so seamlessly and we're so grateful for our volunteer firefighters. And it has been so seamless that we have not renewed the contract since 1997. So we've talked to the town and the idea is that we renew the contract as of 2022 and then pay more diligence to the paperwork that's involved in what otherwise is a seamless relationship with fire protection between the town and the, provided by the village for the town of Ossining.
Right, as the manager has said, basically the agreement would remain as is. We would just put in a new start date with a term and most likely have a term that would just roll over year to year, which is what we have with other IMAs. This one did not back in 97 put that language in. We'll put that language in. But the town certainly wants to do that as well. So this would just make it easy and we can get this agreement, going into play very quickly.
Okay,
Great.
somebody else speak into the mic. I didn't know you were going to be done so quickly.
We are buzzing right along here. Do not blink, you will miss it.
All righty. I'm feeling like somehow today is filled with great conversation. So this is another no-brainer for me. Anybody else on the board?
I'm okay with this, IMA.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, we'll put that in. I like the idea of updating things, so I'm grateful for that one as well.
All right, and next we want to talk about other means of communication. We do our best to do outreach to communicate with our constituents, and we're always looking for new ways to make sure that everybody is aware of what's going on. Electronic signage was the topic of a board discussion. This topic was brought up by Trustee Fritchie. So we have looked at electronic signage, and Trustee Fritchie was there with Paul Fraioli and Jaimie Hoffman to evaluate where we would put this and what it would look like. And we have a brief presentation that Jaimie has put together, and I'd like to have her do that from where she sits upstairs. Jaimie, whenever you're ready.
Sorry, I thought I was unmuted. After I tell everybody to talk
Jaimie,
up.
you're muted.
It's always that way, right? Thank you, Karen, Mayor, Board of Trustees. At the beginning of the year, as Karen mentioned, the board had asked for us to research installing an LED display in the village. And last month, we met with Daktronics, who came in with their display trailer for a demonstration to various staff, including Paul, Bill Garrison, and Trustee Fritchie. Daktronics, which you may not know the vendor, but you may know their LED displays because they are the ones that are outside of the county center. The best spot that would provide the most viewership to both vehicle and pedestrian traffic for our LED display would be at the top of Broadway on Highland Avenue, basically outside the rec center, which you'll see here in this picture. So let's talk about how communities use LED displays. You can consider this one more way to get important messaging out to the community. The information we can place on LED displays is endless. We can share emergency notifications, recreational programming, all the way to community engagement. For instance, slides can be created with QR codes, which can then be used to complete surveys or sign up for events, which you've noticed that we've done a lot of surveys in the past year, and this would definitely help for people to have access to those that they may not have gotten our messaging through the internet or through social media or through any of our other means. This is just one more place for us to do that. We can pretty much do any sort of anything we really want on a display short of selling advertising, which a government agency can't do. Here is an example of the upcoming Breakfast for Santa, one of our big events that the Rec Center is hosting in December. You'll see that there's a QR code on it, which leads to the Recreations Community Pass page for registration. So we get to really do whatever we want. So as you guys know, I do all the rec program flyers. So it would just be a resize of it to fit into the pixelation that works with this TV. And that's what they do. So let's learn. There are several styles for installation that exist that vary from the metal poles you'll see under Vernon Township to mason work and MDF structures, which is that little house that you're seeing. So there's a lot of different ways that we can have it displayed, obviously not on a trailer. So let's learn a little bit about the LED display that would work best in the spot atop of Broadway. A unit with a 10mm pixel display it would be considered best for foot and vehicular traffic in this area. That means that the spacing between each pixel on we'll call it a TV, but a screen is 10mm apart. I don't want to date myself here, but let's use the old school light bright toy as an example, where in relation to where you stand or where you're looking at the toy is how you have a better way of viewing the screen. So the closer you are, the harder it is to see. The further back, you can't see it, but if you're in the right spot, you can see it. A 10mm unit will provide the best view for both walkers and drivers. And if at that size, we would have a slide change every 7 seconds, allowing for the premium number of views for the time spent at a regular traffic light. You'll see the pricing here, noting that Daktronics is part of the New York State Sourcewell contract. The pricing from Daktronics is about $32,000, and it includes the screen, the warranty, the training, and the cellular service, which is how the slides get communicated to the unit. So we would create the slides here in our office, and then sort of like, not Bluetooth, but it automatically updates it on the screen. $25,000 for in-house labor, plus the incidentals like landscaping and mason work. And installation would be done by a Daktronics recommended vendor, which we're told runs about $10,000. And this includes the electrical work and the connection of this display, which is about $67,000. I'm sure you've got some questions. This is definitely something new that we haven't talked about here before. So I'm happy to leave the presentation up or take it down. It's up to you, and we can go through questions.
If I could just jump in. Yeah, I was there for the demonstration.
I can't hear you, Bob.
I can't get no closer to the mic.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about swallowing it? This product is guaranteed, I think, 5 years with 20 years of backup parts. Now, the sign, the megapixels, it's a 1 foot by 1 foot block that they can interchange. So if anything goes wrong, they just come out, boom, they put a new block in. It's actually pretty impressive. We were there, he showed us first the 12 or 15 megapixel on one side of the trailer. And then he showed us the 10. And it was a significance of a difference of, it was unbelievable. And it was pretty impressive. You know, I think personally, it's something that we need. And I think the spot where we're talking about would be 2 signs. In other words, faced on an angle. So one would face, if you're sitting on the light, it'd be facing on an angle like this coming up, right? And the other one would be facing the complete opposite angle, catching the
Like a
northbound traffic.
triangle.
Yes.
Like 2 sides of a triangle.
Correct.
Right,
So,
just keeping in mind, but that this pricing is for the double-sided unit.
right,
Yeah, what's wrong with the double-sided?
No, that's what I'm talking about.
That, yeah,
It would be,
it wouldn't be 67,000 twice, it would just be the one.
right. That's the price for the two that's there, that we discussed.
But you might have to spend more for the stand or something. I mean, you might.
No,
have
that's
to
all,
stand.
no, that's all,
All right, just so we're clear, are we all saying the same thing? It's a double-sided. Is it a V shape, each one having a side, like two panels? Or is it like straight and there's two sides to it, back to back? What are we talking
That's
about?
really up to us when we
But
it's the
do the
same
installation
price.
and the labor. Yeah,
Okay, it's probably the casing that then changes a bit. Okay.
it
Go
all
on.
depends on what you want to put.
Okay. And it's by the community center on top over there.
so you'll get traffic coming in both directions and foot traffic as well. We have a tremendous amount of foot traffic in that area, which I think we all know, and people that are driving straight through, that are going to work, what have you, but it would run 24/7. So you'll definitely be able to, I think that there are a few people that you would miss at that point to communicate something with. So you have a better opportunity to share our information with them.
Okay, were you done? Okay. This is actually something I'm very familiar with. I had to install one of these at a community center. It's actually complicated. The warranty, I was gonna ask about the parts, so, because 5 years is nothing, because the first 5 to 8 years, nothing breaks. It's after that.
Only has the replacement of that era of sign they have in storage up to 20 years.
Okay, so that brings the next question. So these things, like so much in that, it's like the TVs in the industry. You buy these things, but there's the next generation comes the minute you buy it. So will they guarantee that they will upgrade to the next generation, or it's just the generation that you buy and then that's it? I'm just asking a question. It's not a challenge. I like the idea. You know that. That's
I honestly don't have that answer.
okay. Because
can find that out, like-
We can ask, because I remember that was one of our issues. Mostly it was underground wiring, and then the minute we installed this, because it took like 7 months with permits and blah, blah, blah. And then we installed it, we were all excited, and it turned out we didn't have to do the wiring, because then, I don't think it was Bluetooth, but you could basically do this from an iPhone. And we
Right,
were-
this includes that cellular service and the modem.
So my question is, in 2 years, something else will come out. So I think we just have to be prepared for change, if possible. If it's not possible, it's not, but just a thought I had. I like it. I think we really, even though there's a lot of people walking by there, it's generally the same people coming on regular. So I really think we have to think more in terms of drivers. If we're gonna, like, you shouldn't do more than 7 flips. You should, there's a certain number of seconds between so people can read. When you're driving, doing a QR code while you're driving, not really recommended, because you're driving, that's supposed to be on your cell phone. These are details. I think here we're like for the big picture discussion. I think it's great. When I did this a few years ago, it was 50 grand. But it also, the big costs are, I think, in like you pour concrete, you put them on the poles, the fabrication. So I don't know what you guys are recommending. You gave us a bunch of choice. I think this is a great idea. I know the high school has one. It has some quick messages. You don't want to overload this, and you do not want to do advertising on this. I think the county center is overkill. I mean, they have these huge multi-screen. Yeah, those are like, I don't know, very expensive, but I think this one is a good try. And did you find out if you buy a second one, if there's like a discount, or I don't know what I'm looking at you, I should be looking at Jaimie. Is it like the same price for 1 or 2, or?
Do you mean like, you mean a double
Do we
set?
want to consider one at the other side of entering or exiting our village?
I don't know. We did talk about possibly, different, there's some other places that we're thinking of putting some signage, like outside of the courthouse, because they need to update their, the signage that's there, because the sun keeps making all the letters melt. Things you don't
Okay,
think about.
Yeah, but
There's definitely like an economy of scale. He did say, they did say that there is that.
okay, anyway, I'm in support of this. I think it's like another piece of, we get not complaints. Everybody does the same thing, I didn't know about it, nobody told me, and by the way, there's too much, so I don't read my emails. So it's never, you're never exactly right, but this is an additional way to communicate with folks. I also think it's nice on Route 9 because people who may be driving through our community might see something at the waterfront, something happening in the community center. I think that's sort of really like cute. And now when we do days for proclamations, we could actually maybe put the names up there for the proclamation thing. So we'll see. Food for thought. Okay, anybody else?
Go ahead,
You know,
go ahead. No, no, go ahead,
I
please.
bet we're gonna say the same thing. You gotta go in the mic. It's a great idea. It's money. I mean, it's $68,000, Is it gonna go in the budget? Like, is it gonna be something that, I mean, do you weigh that against spending that money on something else? Or, I mean, it's a nice to have. To me, it's not a have to have. But, if
I would recommend that we will add it to the capital budget. I think it's important for you to see everything in full context because this is something we would really like to do. But there are a lot of things in the budget this year that we would really like to do. And I just want to make sure that, we're all comfortable with what the implications are for that.
Perfect. I think that's the right way to approach this, but I think we have to, if we in majority don't even like the idea, then the heck with it. So we'll put it in and we'll see what it is in relation to everything else. Were you gonna say the same thing?
Yes, I was actually thinking about.
Ditto would be
And,
great.
I do have something else to add. So maintenance on this. What is the maintenance for this, something like this, if it was to pass after capital project? Do we know?
What is the what?
The maintenance.
Define maintenance.
sounds like the first time.
Well, we're talking about $32,000, I believe, Jaimie, if you want to put down.
I think it would, I think that it depends on whether or not whatever the issue would be is covered by the warranty. I think most issues that we would come up with, like, a truck flying into it, or,
If you
there's
put
so
the
much snow
location-
that it shorts out, all those different things that maybe we can't even think of that could happen, but I'm sure, not to volunteer Stuart to do it, but we can have him review the warranty and see if we have any other things that we think could possibly happen in that spot and ask them to add that to the contract for
Well,
coverage.
We'll look at the warranty too. We can help Stuart out.
Jaimie, could you put the map up, please, the location?
Sure, hold on one second. Okay. This piece?
Yes.
Okay.
So that location is, to me, is a very travelable location, sure. I think it's a great location for that sign. I just have concerns of accidents, sure. So to me, if this was to pass, I would like to suggest to put some boulders in front of or around. As we know, there is some signage in there as well that may have to be relocated. So it's not just, it may be just a one-time fee, but it's not just $67,000. Sure. There's a
Right.
little bit more than that.
So things to think about, just to help you with when you're thinking about making it a stationary object, there's usually footers that are there's like a concrete footer of about 500 pounds that's going to be placed in first, and then everything gets built around it. It isn't, it's not movable. It's definitely not going to be flimsy. So.
Did you bring the other one when you're talking about the $32,000 and what is in that section of this sign?
This one?
Thank
Okay.
you. So when you're talking about Verizon and cellular, so we're talking about internet access, sure? That's what this is as well? Just
Right, it comes with
basically-
internet access. I
Okay.
guess you could kind of look at it like it's a cell phone. I mean, it's not going to ring, but it has service on it that is cellular.
Yeah.
It's
so let me
not,
ask
it's
you
not
this, so-
Wi-Fi.
So Jaimie, so do we have to pay for cell phone access or internet access to this? Is that a monthly fee as well that we have to add to our budget?
I don't believe so. I believe it has that's included in it, because when you're like if I'm at my desk and I'm creating the flyer, then I send whatever I'm doing to the unit, it automatically goes, it's a receiver, sort of like, I would say probably more like a Kindle, where you don't really need service on it. It has it, but you can't, it's a very low level service. It
So
doesn't
that's only
need,
for 5 years, or that's for the life of this?
it's for the life of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Sure.
All right. All right, so we have a path forward. We're in support in theory. And in practice, we will have to be practical when we look at it in relation to the many, many, many requests that will be going on during the budget. When we look at capital, et cetera.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaimie. Next, we have a street awning, I'm sorry, no, awning replacement application for Doca's Restaurant. And I will turn it over to Stuart Kahan, Counsel.
Thank you, Manager. Folks, this is an application for an awning permit with regard to a proposed awning replacement at Doca's. The Historic Preservation Commission has already granted a certificate of appropriateness. Because this overhangs the sidewalk, it requires approval from the board. And we would ask for that approval through a resolution to be presented next week so that the building inspector can issue the permit and they can install the awning. It will be similar to the awning that is at First Village Coffee. So that's, but again, it was viewed by HPC and they unanimously granted the certificate of appropriateness last month, I believe.
All right, any objections? Anybody? We're all good?
Yeah, I saw the picture of it. It's very cute. There's a
It is
boat.
cute.
Yeah, it's great.
That was-
I think it's gonna be a nice little
Cute.
moment.
Okay.
Okay, and then, thank you, Stuart. I noticed that Chief Sylvester is here, so I would like to invite him up. And he will give the third quarter report on, third quarter report on police reform. So, welcome, Chief.
Sure, great. Are we able to put the spreadsheet up? That's what we've been doing.
Who do you give it to?
It's
Yep,
online.
I can put it up if you can give me just a moment.
And you'll get
Jaimie will.
Thank you, Jaimie.
You want to sit down or something, or you're good?
I can stand it.
Okay.
It's going to take just a moment. I'm having a little bit of a internet thingy.
So while we have this, once you go through update, we'll ask some questions. In the work session, this is the third update you're doing this year?
Third quarter, so yeah.
Third, no.
Second of two.
So there's 2 per year, and this is the second one for this year. Okay. Once we go through this, then we will be updating the website. Once we hear the updates, then we will update the website. So the website has it for May, which makes sense, and now we'll update it in October as needed. I was just saying that while we were waiting for this.
Oh, that's gonna be hard to read from here. Okay.
Do you need a screen or something?
Can you
There's
zoom
one
in?
right there.
No, can you
I
zoom in?
envisioned this going a little different.
Oh, okay.
This is the first one we're doing in person. All the rest of these, we've always been on Zoom, so it has
So you
the
had that.
ability to
so
have
we
the
can-
screen
It's all right.
correctly.
We can-
Give us a minute.
Jamie, we can zoom in a little closer as we go through and you can scroll along with the dialogue here. Does that work?
So, I mean, look, from memory, I can go off the first 5 or 6 of those all deal with legislative issues that were indicated to be local law number 1. So those are a bit outside of my scope, and those are to be dealt with by the board.
Hold on, she's getting it. There we go.
Sure.
Can you see that?
Okay. Bless you.
So those first 5, 6, all of those are outside of my control. Those are all dealing with the CCRB and their village code things. So we had left those there. Again, 7 is also involving the same thing. Really, where it comes down to things that I'm working on right now, 16 starts to deal with LGBTQ+ policies that we were working on. The lion's share of what's on here has already been addressed. There's not a whole lot that was still in process. So, okay, 16 goes together with, there was one other that goes together with. we'll catch it. Number 24 also is going to be together there. So we've had opening conversations with the executive director of the loft. I've got a phone meeting with them on Friday, and that's going to be our first step to start reviewing all of our policies with them. We've also discussed with them trainings, and they said that they have trainings that they've designed for police departments. They've not been deployed in many places, but they are interested in partnering with us. So once we get that together, I know that one of the intentions the board had expressed is that there were certain community members to be involved in that process. Once we have our specifics with them and we get our foundational work done, then we'll start getting into those type of things.
Okay, now Christina's name is still on there. Is she still fully engaged in this, or, because we're updating this list, I just.
So this is one that absolutely we will include her. I've not spoken with her. Detective Chavez had interacted with her some time ago. He's, like many other things in our department, people have multiple tasks.
Mhm.
So this is one that I took the lead on now because he's been busy with a lot of other stuff. So yeah, once I get the whole structure of this set up, then we will include her in all those things. The intention is to have those initial conversations with the loft and find out what it is that they can offer to us to ensure that they're our best resource, and then start bringing community.
Okay, I just want to share with you that she's involved with the loft. So the sooner the better, because she's actually involved with them as well. So it just would be nice synergistic item.
Okay. Moving down. So then number 18 was to work with Westchester County and neighboring. So that was mental health. So as the board's well aware, our mobile crisis response team is up and running, fully functional. Generally, we've been regarded as the example for the rest of the county. I know that some of the other catchment areas using different vendors haven't actually even been able to staff their mobile crisis teams. Ours is functional 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. Monday to Friday. They go out probably a half dozen times every single day, both on response with police officers on certain things. They're going out on follow-up work on their own. They are fully integrated into our department, a part of our community. They've attended block parties with us, which is, we'll touch on community outreach stuff in a minute, but that is fully the reason that we do those kind of things, is to get people in a fun setting familiar with some of those resources. So we hosted the Civilian Complaint Review Board and people from the Police Reform Committee, as well as the town board at headquarters, and did a tour and a meet and greet with Michael Orth, who's the commissioner of the Department of Community Mental Health. So we gave some of the community access to that already. Like I said, we've been introducing them out in public. They have been spending a lot of their time when they're not on calls, which is not a lot of free time that they have, but in the free time they have, they have been going out on their own to meet with community groups to try and build partnerships. So they are out there. They've been very, very good. They've been able to help us on a number of calls so far. So they are everything that we had envisioned it to be, and I would say more. The full expectation for this is that at some point it'll be a 24/7, 365 operation. The big hurdle to that is hiring great staff. They have a commitment that they're not going to hire just anybody, because just anybody isn't working out, and that's what we're seeing from the other vendors. So as they're bringing on additional staff, they will expand. The Port Chester catchment area is now 7 days a week, but still not 24 hours. We should be, and they were up and running before we were up and running. So we should be trailing that fairly closely. And it's definitely something that I think is a real tremendous asset for our community, for our police department.
So I just want to get this right, because I took notes. So for now, it's 7 a.m. to 11 p.m.
Correct.
Between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m., what happens if somebody?
They still have it on call. I mean, it's really not different from what it was before. Police officers are still going on calls, and there's two different real scenarios that happen here. Where there's a person in crisis and we need them, we have the ability to contact the supervisor and see if somebody can come in. In most cases, police officers are tending to the call and passing on the information to the crisis team as follow-up. And one way or another, they're able to engage with people. The reality is that their efforts aren't necessarily best delivered in the moment on calls for service so far. There are certainly those crisis calls where they're helpful in the moment, but a lot of what they're doing is following up with people after the fact to ensure that they're receiving services, to encourage people to take advantage of services that are available to them. They've had people that are consenting to them contacting their own private practitioners. So, they're really a community resource to help stabilize people and things like that. We haven't had like a real crisis call yet where we've needed them to sort of intervene on our behalf. More times than not, they're able to help with the after effects and the long-term process.
And this is 7 days a week, 7 a.m. I'm sorry, I just didn't.
They are right now Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. to 11 p.m.
Okay.
And like I said, Family Services of Westchester, who's our vendor for this, through Westchester County, their intent is to expand as quickly as possible, but we found some real pitfalls in just hiring people very quickly. Part of the issue that we have here is that in certain catchment areas, they have space where they're not with the police department, so they're a completely separate entity. For us, they are sitting in the main hallway of our building 16 hours a day. The relationships are being built. They are part of our operation. So, yeah, I'm certain that they could have hired a lot of people and made this 24 hours. I'm also certain that that would have been detrimental to the program. They're really very careful about who they're bringing into the program so that this can be sustainable and really a long
That, I
term.
mean, that's the right thing to do. And you said on the average, they're on like about 6 times a day
mean,
on the calls?
It really, really depends.
Okay.
I mean, police calls, mental health calls, all of that, it really depends. On sometimes they're going out 4 or 5 times a shift, and on sometimes it's 4 or 5 times a day, and there's some days where they have even less than that. The reality is that they're probably going out on more calls here. They're definitely going proportionately on more calls knocking than the rest of the catchment area because they're based here and our officers are seeing them face to face and their relationships are there. That's always going to be a fact. And that's one of the reasons I was so interested in being a part of the RFP process and getting this all deployed. But really the other thing that you see is when you're in-house, it makes it more comfortable for the cops to say, we probably don't need you, but we like you. So, in times when you're seeing them on high call volumes, it's not necessarily an indication of us having like a higher mental health call volume than other places, but it's definitely the cops that are sitting there and saying, let's take another approach to this call and see how it can go better. We've seen really great, we've seen some really great moments. We've seen some really challenging moments. There's people that we've known, community members we've interacted with over the years, that we always said really something, there needs to be something else for them. And we're finally able to go on those calls and have that something else. So it's been tremendously positive. So that was number 19. Number 20 talks about crisis intervention training. So as we've talked about, that's something offered in the police academy. So probably about half of our staff has gone through that now. With every new hire that we have, we're adding that on. It's a training evolution we're looking at for next year for that staff, those staff members that hadn't gone through that in the police academy, only because it's something that not the whole department needs, but still a lot of people. So that's going to wait for the beginning of next year. We're 21 and 22. 21 and 22 work together. Website is things looking to add to that all the time. So some upgrades have been made there. There can be more. I know that the big things that were on there in the beginning of this was to make sure that every police officer was listed. Everybody is on there. If anybody wants to reach out to the officer they had on a call, their email is there, the supervisors, everybody from me to the newest police officers. I don't know if the ones in the academy are there because they don't generally check their department emails on a regular basis yet. Number 23 was improved community outreach. So that's sort of the hallmark of our department, and is always looking for new ways to engage with the community. Things that we've gotten this year has been challenging only because coming off of COVID, it's not so much that we're looking for new things, it's that we start to reintegrate the things that we've always done. So we had 2 block parties this year, and as we've done in the past, we partnered with the school district, with Feeding Westchester, with Meals on Main, with United Way, with Open Door, with Department of Community Mental Health. So we've had all these organizations there. In large part, our initiative is to bring people together with food and music. DJ Johnny G, always there to volunteer his services. And then pair people up with all the services that are available. So like I said, when you go to that, we gave out 700 backpacks at one of those. The mental health team was able to go out there and engage with people. So we had movies in the park. Some of those got canceled because of weather. We've got Halloween coming up right now, where we'll bring back our trunk or treat. And as we go into the winter, we have some other options that we're looking at. Always trying to balance out the need to engage with people with the keeping people safe and not overcrowding folks.
I'm just, I just want to get something clear here. So you read this as the police department should implement new improved community policing efforts. And you said community outreach. That's not actually what number 23 says. That's one definition of community policing, but my recollection, and I think for this upcoming year, and we may need to talk to Chairman Shaw, who is part of that piece of police reform, is community policing, my recollection, was bigger than just community outreach. So what you're doing is stellar, but I think maybe the next phase might be a refresh on what that means.
And half of the program. So the other half of this is the enforcement effort. So we actually
Okay.
took an officer out of patrol 2 out of every 4 days, and we specifically assigned him to quality of life issues. So Addison Chavez, because he's bilingual, is out and dealing specifically with the issues of drinking in public in particular areas. For instance, State Street between Academy Place and William Street has been a particular problem. He's out there every single day dealing with those things, and not just issuing tickets, but connecting people with resources again. He's dealing with the businesses. We have some things going on with the bars that the board can expect to hear much more about in the future. So yeah, the idea with enhancing community policing is twofold. It's partly the outreach side, but it's also the enforcement efforts. And then in between there is the connecting people with resources. So it's not just the throwing parties thing, but it is, it's an effort to sort of build a community around this idea of public safety.
Well, it's both. It's hand in glove. So I think it's the right approach. The thing about this list is it deprives us in the community of seeing all of this. And I mean, like the list of like 8 or 9 things, which I couldn't even write fast enough. I'm sure you weren't able to capture everything. If somebody just comes and reads it, they don't really get the feeling of, because that trustee Lopez is our liaison to this group. I just think we're robbing ourselves of some of the good work being done by not giving it more volume as to all of these things that are going on. We do publicize them all, but we maybe need to add some of that in.
Yeah, and what I would underscore is that this particular list is a way of keeping track of particular commitments that we made as a result of Executive Order 203. It's a very specific document, and get to much more robust efforts that you're alluding to and that you're expanding on, Chief. And so this is the beginning where folks that are interested in this start and then can continue to learn about all the efforts from there.
So 24 goes back into the same thing we were talking about at, I think, 19, and it's our relationship with the LGBTQ plus community. So the policies as well as the training evolutions that we're designing will all be covered in that same conversation there. 25 deals with diversity of the department. So folks have seen the people that we've hired. Our last class, 5 new police officers. We had 3 Hispanic or Latino, 2 Spanish speaking, another woman, which is fantastic. We don't have a whole ton of women on our civil service list. We've got 4, maybe 5 openings coming up for the January class, and we've canvassed for that, and we're gearing up for interviews coming up really soon. So, the challenge for diversity in hiring is always going to be that civil service ties our hands a little bit. It's a long-term process. It's something that I think we've made a lot of progress on in this particular list. We spent a lot of time recruiting. We've seen some dividends from that. I don't recall what our number of Spanish-speaking cops is now, but it's at an all-time high. And it's something that's been really helpful. The other side to that, just so you know, the crisis team is committed in Ossining, different than some of the other catchment areas that we have one person speaking Spanish all the time. So in addition to all the cops there, the crisis team has come in and helped us to translate from time to time when needed. So the more people that are bilingual, the better. So 26 is a recruiting program in the high school. We've discussed it with the school district. We have not moved on that yet. That's something that we're really looking for to get going on soon. What we did do is deploy additional school resource officers, which I've always felt was the best recruiting tool that we have in terms of kids in the schools. So from when you come in pre-K until you go to high school, there is a police officer in your school in all of those grades. We specifically selected people. We have a diverse crowd that represents different groups in the community in order to sort of find people that look like folks, particularly having a woman in the schools we haven't had in a long time. And that's our first step in there. In terms of a formal recruiting process in the high school, civil service test isn't coming around for another couple of years, but it's something that we've got to work on. Where are we at there? So our multi-year training plan. So 27, so here's some things that we have coming up in terms of our longer term training plan. This year, we sent 2 officers to Procedural Justice Instructor School. So that is a class that New York State designed to teach fairness in policing. And that is going to come out next year as a department-wide evolution. So some departments doing that, not too many. This is one that we're looking for every single police officer to go through our procedural justice training. In addition to that, we worked with personnel to get all of our officers up and online for New York State trainings. So we'll cover things like diversity in the workplace. Our sexual harassment training will be online now. And we're going to knock out as many of the trainings as New York makes available that way for those kind of trainings. We've also will be bringing to the board during budget season this year the Axon Officer Safety Program, which comes with virtual training, and they offer things not only use of force training, but as some of the trustees had the opportunity to see when they demoed the equipment, they had things like there's mental health training there and dealing with persons with certain disabilities, empathy training, and things of that sort that they offer there. So that's a really exciting option that we're looking at, but always looking to add other trainings. Those are the ones that we have for sure scheduled right now, pending budget. So that's what we've got for training, in addition to all the other training without taking anything out that we're already doing. 28 deals with the police academy. There's not been a meeting on changing the curriculum in the police academy lately. I'd have to check back with the county commissioner and see if they're interested in changing. I know that they're adding evolutions all the time and trying to amend them. Much of this is controlled by Department of Criminal Justice Services in Albany, who determines how long the academy is. So in order to add something in, they'd have to add days to the academy, which adds cost to municipalities. So that's a bit outside of our control, but it's something that when the conversations come up, I'm a part of as the president of county chiefs and state chiefs, notwithstanding we haven't had a major move in that lately that we've been a part of. And the last one is the board's implementation. Perfect.
If you have anything else?
No.
Okay. All right. So we just have to remind ourselves, it's a little weird to say quarterly, but do twice. So we just have to figure out so people know when we're having these meetings. I somehow have it in my mind that we were going to do 3 presentations a year. The last quarter being left out because we're so crazed with budgets and all sorts of stuff in the last quarter of a year. But, you know, we could decide to do 2 a year. You know,
I'm prepared to come back and talk about the work that we're doing anytime the board needs.
no, I understand. I just think you have to
Doesn't
set it
necessarily
up.
have to be.
Yeah. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, Mayor. This was when we talked about this back in, I think, January. We had said we'd like to do 2 updates a year to start. And so we sort of identified quarters 1 and 3.
Okay.
So we're a couple weeks late on the quarter 3, but that's why it was labeled that on the agenda.
Oh, that's all right. So, yeah, I just thought it's confusing. People read it. So I just want to, so for 2023, let's just do like what we do with our own meeting, just so that people who are looking for, waiting for it, they'll know, you know, when it's coming up. So that's just a nice way to communicate. Thank you, Chief. Any other questions or comments by you or anybody else around the table? No? Yeah. Okay, you're good.
All right.
All
Thank you.
right.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Where are we on the agenda, village manager?
That concludes our agenda for tonight's performance. Yeah, we are officially done.
Okay, anybody have anything? No exec, correct? Okay, a rarity in our day, but we had meetings before this meeting, so I think it's a long day, and I think we're all beginning to look like it's been a long evening and a long work day. All right, do I have a motion?
Second.
Okay, first you have to also say what the motion is, folks. Motion to.
End the meeting.
There we go. Second?
Yeah.
Second.
All right,
Yes,
all in
second.
favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We will see everyone next Wednesday. And this concludes our meeting this evening at 9:20.